Zirawen. Well, good morning, everyone. We are seeing that people are joining us via Zoom and equally via Facebook Live through the AMEI official webpage. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Here from Mexico, United States of America, or somewhere from Europe. On behalf of the Mexican Association for International Studies, Asociación Mexicana de Estudios Internacionales, and our president, Damaso Morales, I wish to all of our panelists, at first, a warm welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today, for separating some of your time to talk to us, to our members, to our followers. But also welcome to all of the viewers. Thank you for being with us today. Before we proceed to our conversation, yesterday we have seen all shocking and heartbreaking videos, images and stories from Beirut, from Lebanon. Our hearts today, our thoughts, our prayers go out for the victims, for their families. Our prayers also go out to all the people who are still fighting for their lives, to all the people who are injured. And also our prayers go out to fast recovery to them and to the recovery of the society and Beirut, Lebanon itself. We pray today for Lebanon, and as we discuss other topics, we do keep them in our minds. The topic of our conversation today, as announced, is the future of Europe. A very interesting story for all of us who are dealing with European affairs, but also for anyone who is interested in global affairs. For that purposes, we have gathered a rather remarkable group of experts, of academics, think tankers, thinkers, and activists. And so far, I believe this is the most diverse conversation that we are having, that we are organizing on behalf of the AMEI since June. At least in the terms of geographical representation and in terms of the expertise about the topic. But without any further ado, I pass the microphone to my dear friend, Dr. Zirawen Villamar, who is joining us today from Berlin. He's working in Berlin as a Mexican diplomat at the embassy of Mexico to Germany. Aside of being a Mexican diplomat and serving his country, Dr. Villamar is also a distinguished and long-term member of the AMEI itself. Actually, we had a pleasure to meet for the first time in one of the AMEI congresses that unfortunately this year we had to cancel. Dr. Villamar, the microphone of the Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, can you hear me all? I guess yes. Nicola, thank you very much. Thank you, AMEI, for the invite. It is a real pleasure for me to be here with you across the Atlantic, but also across some other inner European borders to moderate this session. As you mentioned, we're gonna discuss the future of Europe, which sometimes seems to be rather cloudy if we should describe it in methodological terms. So we all know the rules of this debate. We are inviting our speakers to take the floor and present in 10 minutes their views on these scenarios for the future of Europe. And I would like to start in this case with Paolo Vacca. So let me first say that he's an engaged activist promoting the idea of a further integration and federalization of the European Union. He has been dedicated to this task for decades as leader, for instance, of the Young European Federalist, and later, being not that young, as Secretary General of the Union of European Federalists. Paolo Vacca is joining us right now from the Netherlands. So please, Paolo, the floor is yours, and I will interrupt you when you reach 9 minutes of presentation. Okay.
Sure.
Good.
Thanks, thanks, Zirawen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola, and thanks, Ame, for the invitation. I mean, all of us engaged in European affairs in Europe participate to a lot of debates on the future of Europe, but it's very unusual and rare, certainly for me, to participate to a debate on this topic with an audience from outside Europe. So I'm very much looking forward to it. It's a very timely discussion. The future of Europe, the future of the European Union, the scenarios in front of us. It's a very timely discussion because there is a lot going on. There is really a lot going on. The European Union is in a phase of transformation. And some people may argue that that has always been the case, that the European Union is an entity in constant transformation and there is nothing new under the sun. But in reality, that's not really the case. If you look at the life of the European Union in the last 10 years, despite a lot of pressure to react by strengthening its institutions, expanding its policies and its resources, not much has happened. Despite the financial crisis, despite a wave of immigration that we have seen and that was calling for a European response, despite increased criticism on the European Union has not been changing much in the last 10 years. And somebody may even say that the last two big things that happened at the European Union were the monetary union decided 30 years ago and the big enlargement of the early 2000s. And after that, we made small tweaks here and there to institutions and policies, but not changing much. On the contrary, in the last year and in the last few weeks and few months, things are in motion at an incredible speed. Why things were not changing before, and why are they in motion now? Things were not changing for very long in the European Union because member states had very different views on what the European Union should do and where the European Union should head to. Some were and still are integrationist. Others, and a lot others, were reluctant, if not even Eurosceptics. And this dynamic between integrationist states and Euro-reluctant or Eurosceptic has blocked the European Union for the past 20 years. Now we see that things are changing. And what is changing? The first factor that has changed completely the climate is Brexit. The decision of the United Kingdom to leave the European Union has literally opened the eyes of many politicians, but also of normal citizens on the importance of the European Union, and has, in my opinion, convinced at least the core countries of the European Union that we have something extremely precious to defend, and that it needs to be defended at all costs. And defending at all costs means going ahead with further integrations in terms of policies and in terms of institutions. And while some people were afraid that Brexit would pave the way to further countries leaving the European Union, on the contrary, it has created a stronger spirit among all the others to go ahead, despite there are other member states, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe and in Northern Europe, that are still skeptical on strengthening and further developing the European Union. But I think the mood and also the understanding of the importance of the European Union has changed completely as a result of Brexit, of the clumsy way it has been managed, on the difficulties to regulate the relations between the UK and the EU. The second element is the election of President Macron in France, now 3 years ago, which has completely changed the European discourse, which has put on the table again the idea of a sovereign Europe, of a political Europe, of a more integrated Europe. Macron has been confronted with skepticism by other member states and also by Germany for the first years of its mandate. But things in the past few months have changed. And I think we are witnessing a renewed and strong Franco-German intent to drive the European Union forward. The alignment between France and Germany has always been crucial for the advancement of the European Union. In the past 10 years, Germany has been very reluctant to, in particular, strengthen the monetary union because of concerns on the way money in the south of Europe would be used, and this has blocked progress in many fronts. Now we see in the last months a new alignment between France and Germany on strengthening the European Union, on strengthening the Eurozone, and plan together the future of Europe. The two most immediate results of this new alignment are the reaction of the European Union to the COVID crisis, which is proving a game changer for the whole European Union. And the second is this project of the conference on the future of Europe. And I will explain it better in a minute. The reaction of the European Union to COVID has been different from the past. While in front of the financial crisis, the European Union has hesitated to take measures. It has taken years to take measures to help countries in difficulties. Confronted with the COVID crisis, given its gravity, after a few weeks of wavering, I think we have got our acts together, and thanks to the initiatives of a group of countries, and then by the European institutions themselves, in particular the Parliament and the Commission, we have the European Union has developed a package of financial instruments to address the COVID crisis that are not only helping the crisis, but also changing the nature of the European Union fundamentally. The European Commission has proposed, and the member states have accepted, to launch a recovery plan to fund the economic and social recovery of the European Union following COVID, a very substantial one, 750 billion euro. For the first time, a program of this size launched by the European level for a very short-term challenge. European resources that will be used for a European plan. And big novelty, it's a plan that will be financed by issuing common debt, by issuing debt by the European Union itself. It's not technically the first time, but it's the first time in such a size, which creates a channel for the European Union to attract financial resources to sponsor policies also for the future. And since we are contracting that, we are starting to discuss what type of revenues we need, what type of taxes we need to be able to repay this debt when maturity comes. And this package of financial instruments of European debt and European taxes will fundamentally change the way the European Union operates and in fact what the European Union is, moving it more and more to a supranational institution with its own financial autonomy, and moving away from the still heavily intergovernmental component that still is heavy in the European Union. The second result of this new alignment between France and Germany and also some other member states is the launch at the end of this year, we hope, if not postponed at the beginning of next year, of a conference on the future of Europe, which will be a combination of debates with European citizens across Europe and a type of convention with representatives of the European Parliament, national parliaments, and member states in Brussels to look at the policies of the European Union, at the institutions of the European Union, and propose reforms to be through a 1.5 year work to the member states for implementation. And personally, I'm convinced that while maybe 2 years ago, the mood in Europe was heavily Eurosceptic, and with nationalism and populism and Euroscepticism on the rise across the continent, I think we are now on a positive wave. And I think these two trends of the reaction to COVID and the opportunity of the future of Europe can bring really an incredible step change in terms of further European integration or better unification.
Excellent.
And I can stop here at 10
yes,
minutes sharp, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually 9. So you were, yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. This is quite efficient, I would say. Thank you very much, Paolo, also for now setting some conditions to our debate, how to prepare, how to think Europe after you pointed out to some elements, evolution, and sometimes even forces fighting each other. Now, I would like to give the floor to Sonia, and please excuse me because I'm sure I will not pronounce it well. Stojanovic Gajic.
Perfect.
Thank you. Sonia is in Serbia. She's present from Serbia, and she's one of the most prominent civil society activists and think tankers in Serbia and the Southeast Europe. For many years, she has been leading one of these think tanks in the Balkans, which is called the Belgrade Center for Security Policy. Recently, she has been expanding her activities across the borders, not only in European, but also working in Latin American organizations. Last year, 2019, she received an award as the Person of the Year by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. Sonia, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this very kind introduction. And I'm very grateful to the Mexican Association for International Relations interest in engaging in discussion with Europe. As you heard in introduction, my area of expertise is security, very broadly understood, not just the security of states, but also security of people living in these different states. And this is where I see most commonalities between Latin America and Europe. And this is why, together with RESDAL, the Latin American Security and Defense Network, I have had initiated the global community of practice on between civil society organizations interested in these matters. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Nikola Živković, who connects all these dots or the people across the continents. So what I want to discuss with you today is a bit different from what Paolo presented. He gave the presentation on key developments in EU, and I'm going to speak more about the domestic politics, and not in one particular country, but across the continent. And I would be very keen to hear how much dynamics that I'm going to describe is similar or different from what you are living in Mexico and across Latin America. So what I'm going to focus on is how COVID crisis was interpreted as a security problem, presented as a security threat, and what are the consequences of using security institutions and security instruments to address a health problem and this kind of crisis. So for those of you who follow the news, you remember that in initial days of COVID, there was a lot of use of security vocabulary to describe the emergency. President Macron, President Putin, a number of other presidents called it a war against the virus, and that justifies mobilizing not just the health and general public institutions response, but also security institutions response, and also a number of extraordinary powers given to governments. Some of the governments legalized this response by calling on states of emergencies. Some others called on situations of emergency or other lower level legal framework. to use the extraordinary powers. Some pretended that nothing happened, like our friends in Belarus, Tajikistan at the beginning, saying that there were no COVID cases and not introducing any measures. But whatever the legal framework it was, in most of European countries, what we've seen is mobilization, not just of militaries and police and other security agencies to provide support to the public institutions, but also calling upon different rules of engagement, so to say, in addressing problems locally. So we had a closure of borders for a first time at much more significant scale than during migration crisis. And the Schengen area as such is under question and is slowly only coming back. And within the countries, we had the expansion of the role of, for example, militaries that not only provided assistance to health institutions, but start acting more in relation to the public order, kind of policing tasks, or dealing with the issues such as spread of fake information. So kind of intervening with the rights of expression in different countries. Of course, the scale at which this has happened and the consequences of this move are different depending on the quality of democracies and traditions in which it was used. But across much of, for example, Central and Eastern Europe and the Balkan states, it had actually a negative effect. And I'll give an example. Because of this use of, or securitization of COVID crisis and calling on extraordinary powers, we have seen security institutions being actually used to control other areas of governance and to limit the human rights. The most, I would say, shocking example is, for example, Hungary, where the law on a state of emergency has allowed military to take over control over a number of public companies, public enterprises, but also to go into private enterprises of strategic importance for a country. And although this might make sense if you are to ensure business continuity, for example, of electricity system, because of the lack of good democracy in Hungary beforehand, there was a worry that this was used for actually privatization of public resources or rechanneling the resources. In a number of other countries, we've seen security institutions being involved with political processes. In Poland, and I'm sure Piotr will discuss it further, military was called to organize the post office distribution of votes for elections, which I think was canceled later on. But most worryingly was how security institutions in weak democracies were used to further limit the human rights. And I'll give three typical examples. One, of course, was the limits on freedom of movement, which wasn't affecting everyone equally. And in a number of countries, the response of security institutions to break of quarantine or public assemblies have been a violent one, a repressive one, although not in all countries. The other trend, the negative trend, has been extensive use of surveillance through a rapid development of contact tracing applications. The most worrying was, for example, Israeli example. In European context also, Czech example is not a good one. In both cases, they use the intelligence service, in Czech case, military intelligence, to contact trace between infected persons and their acquaintances. And there was a worry if this was a proportional and if this information is going to be used only for this purpose and how it's going to be potentially misused. And then the last and not the least, the move that was supported frequently by the EU was use of security institutions to counter fake news. Of course, fake news was a big and real threat in response to COVID crisis. Much of the fake news was spread by third-party actors or the external powers. There is evidence by you that China and Russia has promoted much of the fake news on the source of the COVID virus, but also by domestic right-wing groups. However, in a number of countries, the confrontation to the fake news was actually misused to limit the freedom of expression of the critics of the government. So it wasn't these, semi-truths that were shared by, external actors or transnational right-wing groups that were suppressed. It were domestic investigative journalists, civil society that portrayed frequently the worse situation than the public sources that was prosecuted or intimidated under the excuse of fake news. And what is the consequence of all this? Why I'm speaking about this topic? The consequence is that some of these extraordinary powers might get normalized even after the official end of the state of emergencies and different legal regimes that were triggered as a response to COVID crisis. So we will see normalization of surveillance with use of biodata and contact apps in the future. We are seeing normalization of confrontation of fake news in a very uncritical way. And what is the most worrying is that EU itself internally is not anymore defending the ideal of being a normative Europe or projecting some of the principles strictly both at home and abroad. And this area of, for example, democratic accountability of security institutions is something where EU still has an advantage, being one of the most safe continents in the world, but also the most democratic ones. So I think the change or the response to the bad trends that were triggered by COVID should start by defending the good practices, the good balances of power, checks and balances that were built in the European democratic systems. And the change should start from consolidating this at home and then spreading it further to the neighborhood and the partnerships of the EU. So my main point is that one of the biggest challenges of COVID is not actually creating insecurities, but it's actually threatening democracies in Europe, not only in security policy area, but also in other areas. And this is why the response should be to strengthen democracies, even in these new circumstances, and to try to project this ideal of strong democracies and security institutions under democratic control, both inside and outside of the EU.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you very much for this presentation. Quite enlightening, no doubt. I've been reading, obviously, the media from the European countries, which is part of my work here every day in the embassy. But the way you summarize it is quite interesting, and how the COVID is not only threatening, as you said, the health of Europeans, but also the democratic normalcy in many countries. Thank you very much for this. Now I will move a little bit south from in the map of Europe, and I will give the floor to Pyotr Kaczynski. I hope I pronounce it well. He's, as he shared with me and with the panelists some minutes ago, he's now in the island of Samos in Greece, doing some field research. Piotr has developed a career as a thinker on various aspects of European affairs. He's a liberal think tanker, consultant, lecturer, and activist, building his career for many years in Brussels, working for the Centre for European Policy Studies, CEPS, and as a political advisor to the European Parliament. He is very famous in European and Polish media, leading a battle against anti-European policies and skepticism in his own country. So please, Piotr, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for those kind words. Clearly, I'm not doing enough since anti-liberal forces keep on winning over the last 5 years in my country. But jokes aside, I'm sure being Polish and following Polish news definitely calls on attention for what's going on in this one particular country that soon after Brexit, February 1st, has advanced in the rankings of the most important states in Europe from whatever it was to one position higher in the ranks of member states. Now, that is relevant and irrelevant at the same time. Poland, without the UK, is the largest economy of the European Union outside of the Eurozone. UK economy is much larger than the Polish economy. And the very fact that UK is leaving or has left identifies this problem, this dichotomy of Eurozone accession
Oops. Piotr? Okay, I think we lost the connection.
Bulgaria and a Eurozone accession, whatever you said.
Yes, could you please repeat just what you said 30 seconds ago? Because we lost a little bit your connection.
Perhaps, Piotr, we could try if you would turn off the video. I know it's never nice, but better to have your contribution well heard.
I'm not hearing you at all.
It will be maybe we could try like that, huh?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
If somebody can hear me, please type that you can hear me. Then I will know that you, because I have some problems seeing some of the images. But I could listen to everybody speaking so far. So I don't know what might happen.
We could try to turn off the video, and maybe that will improve the quality of the and people can see you. You are very present in the media, and they can see your lovely face also. With other means, but this could be maybe a solution. Let's give it a try.
Okay. So I don't know if what was heard as much. I was saying about the Eurozone accession of Bulgaria and Croatia that is well under right now, scheduled for 2023 if everything goes well. And Poland will be even more marginalized. That's the bottom line message out there: marginalization of Poland and the Poles in the European Union. They don't necessarily see it this way. They see it as defending of sovereignty and nationality and identity, maybe. But clearly this self-isolation is growing. In academic terms, this can be called centrifugal forces in action that brought us Brexit. And they are clearly in operation in Poland right now, without even realizing this. What can the future hold? We see it if we look at young people, first-time voters in Poland. First-time voters, especially male first-time voters, are highly Eurosceptic and highly anti-European. That is also contributing to the general feeling, which I should probably lay out as a first point. There's no such a thing as one Poland. Each elections over the last 5 years showed us that the country is divided and the division is getting bigger and bigger every year. Last presidential elections have proven that two sides of the argument have about 10 million people each, and the division is going strong. So on the one hand, this is not a situation like in many Western European countries, but at the other hand, it's not Turkey, it's not Russia, it's not Hungary, looking inside of the European Union, when the domination of this softer or harder leader / dictator is present. In Poland, this is not the case. At best, half of the society is able to be manipulated by the ruling class, but the conversation is on, and sometimes the allies come from unexpected places. For example, Donald Trump is on one hand supportive of the Warsaw rulers, but at the same time he will be defending, and his administration is defending, American interests in the country. For example, American foreign investments. For example, American foreign investments in the media. And those media are privately owned and independent from the government. Outstanding issues out there. Two massive ones are the rule of law. That's definitely number one. And this is the most relevant issue because it directly relates to the very membership of the Union. Whether Poland is or not a country with rule of law is a very tangible and real question. Only this week we have had a Dutch court asking on a standard procedure of extradition of a criminal in a criminal situation, whether this person can expect a due trial in Poland. No political issues attached to the case. And the Dutch court was skeptical about the rule of law situation in Poland. To show you what is the reaction of the Polish government, the Polish deputy justice minister says this Dutch court should look at the Dutch court system in the first place, not be critical of the Polish situation. So if this is the response of a Polish official in a particular situation, then I'm very worried about where this country goes forward with the rule of law situation. The second massive bomb out there is the climate policy. The climate and energy transformation that we need, that we are actually undergoing in Europe, requires decarbonization. And so it happens that this is one country that has a big problem out there with some 70% or so of its power still produced from coal. Now, this is much easier, if you like, problem to solve than rule of law, though materially rule of law would be much easier to solve than the climate and coal. Why? Because the Polish general public is more on board. The Polish general public is in line to have clearer air, is in line to have less power produced from coal that more and more is imported from abroad. Is the Polish public that is open to the idea of having your own power produced locally with the solar panels or with other installments. So there is an opening and an opportunity as well. Whether we make it until 2050, it's just a date. The process is necessary. And the process of changing the Polish landscape in energy production is well underway. We are behind some other countries out there, like Spain, but we are ahead of some countries, and to name a few, Germany, for once, the Netherlands, second. The climate revolution in those big industrial countries in Europe is behind what they are saying publicly. And Poland is not really that much behind those. So it is converging on the climate issue. It is converging on energy. I'm not sure if the Polish government will sign up officially to the 2050 decarbonization of the EU idea. But what's important is that we will have less CO2 emissions year by year and decade after decade coming out of Poland. So on that, bomb is rather, I'm more optimistic than pessimistic. The rule of law is an issue that needs to be dealt with politically. We will have a government reshuffling later this year. Unfortunately, I don't see the justice minister, who is the primary author of the problem, going away from his position, but maybe he will, who knows. The politics in Warsaw is very volatile, and I'm happy to report about this for international media. If anybody out there is interested, I'm happy to share more. And I think my time is up. I wanted to pick up on one of the questions that I saw on the chat, since I am in Greece right now. And there was a question about Greek-Turkish relationship.
Exactly. Piotr, please, don't jump yet into that, because I would like to collect all of them, and maybe we can just try to summarize some of the questions. Thank you for the people who have already sent some questions through the Zoom chat or also through a Facebook. Continue doing it. So thank you very much, Piotr, for presenting your assessment on what is happening in the neighboring country to where I am, on the economic sphere, in the rule of law sphere, and also in energy and climate transformation. So now I would like to give the floor to Professor Joaquin Roy, who is joining us through a video connection from Miami, Coral Gables. Joaquin Roy, he's a Jean Monnet professor and director of the University of Miami European Union Center of Excellence. He's a very prolific writer, and I'm pretty sure that if you are following us from Mexico and reading books that are published in Mexico, or some of them also by Amey, you have read him for sure. He's in the American continent, or to put it in the Americas, he's one of the most brilliant experts on European affairs in our continent. And we are absolutely pleased and honored to have him here with us today. So Professor Roy, who is a real guru, according to Damaso Morales, and I completely agree. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. I'm laughing because I was afraid, that you were going to read one of those CVs that they are hidden. And then at the end of that, I always get irritated, because listing the degrees and so on, they always miss, the degree of which I'm most proud of. I have a soccer coaching degree. And this is one of the reasons, why very often, I go back to my native Barcelona in the hope, that in one of those changes, I'll be someday, the soccer coach of Barca anyway. But into more serious things, yes, thank you for the opportunity. I think that we agreed, as in the case of the previous presentation, that I would give, some outline of what actually Spain, has been going through as a result of the pandemic, and linking this, with the contributions, to the European Union, and the link of the European Union with Spain, is has been always very strong, even before joining the European Union. The famous philosopher, writer Ortega y Gasset defined a long time ago, that relationship. He said, quote, Spain is the problem and Europe is the solution. And no matter who is in power in Spain, has been faithful to that, that relationship with Europe, as I said, even though in periods of time, the dictatorships and so on. One more personal confession, and the topic is very close, to me. I would say, to my generation in the 60s in the Spanish universities, and most especially at the University of Barcelona in the law school, where I learned, I heard the first time of what then they were called the European communities. And for us at that time was really frustrating. It would be like when you go to some important museum and they told you see but not touch. It was hurting that we couldn't touch the European communities at that time. And we were very fortunate at that time also in the law school of Barcelona, because the professor in charge of international law was Manuel Diaz de Velasco, that actually some years later became the first Spanish judge in the European Union. So as a review of what has been, the contributions and the experience and this, if we would comply with the rules of modern journalism, U.S. journalism, that dictate you, to start writing and starting off with the most important things, the title, and then a lead, and so on. How can we talk about Spain today without mentioning the most shocking news of the day, yesterday, and actually is going to be confirmed, today, about the residency of the living of Spain, by the former King Juan Carlos. Now, I think it's going to be confirmed that actually he is going to reside, at least for a while, in the Dominican Republic. And that also is going to be news. But as I said, in relationship with the European Union, then we have history. We'll have to recognize also that the biography of King Juan Carlos is linked, with the relationship, with the European Union. Without the return of democracy in Spain, that would have been impossible. Now, taking into account what has been going on during the pandemic and the consequences, I would say, again, personal confessions, that I feel hurt, I feel nostalgic, confused, and a little bit irritated because of the results. Hurt, wounded, simply because, a lot of Spaniards have been suffering, and a lot of them, died because of this tragedy. Confused because of the contrast, between the appearance of the virus, in a country that actually until now, recently, actually has been in the lead in Europe, in the performance of what is called public health system. Very good for a lot of people, no one can just go poor because of lack of health system. And irritated also because of what has been going on, because while the majority of Spaniards complied, with the recommendations, to fight the virus, a minority actually went into the performance of so-called almost suicidal actions, going to parties, and then contribute, to the return of the illness anyway. More personally, definitely all this, I have to review this, from the distance, and I feel nostalgic, because this is one of the only 2 occasions in 54 years that I've been residing in the United States that I didn't return to Barcelona. and thanks, you know, to the virus anyway. So then I have to recall, I have to, you know, review, you know, the circumstances in the, at least, you know, in the two main cities. The pandemic has been made Madrid, you know, the leader in the number of victims, while Barcelona has been seriously injured anyway. But at the same time, I have to express my admiration for the resistance of the majority of the population, you know, to face the tragedy. And then at the same time, that Spain within the European Union performed one of the typical occasions of saying, hey, we are not only followers, you know, good neighbors, but we are leaders into this. And Spain, you know, joined a number of countries that they say, no, we are not going to do it in the old ways. You know, we are going to demand that the reconstruction is going to be done through community funds. Anyway, and then also respect and admiration, because in spite of the certain political, in spite of the tragedy, and in spite of protests, you know, and opportunities of some political parties, you know, to use this politically, you know, the break of the political consensus, you know, has not been broken. And the result is, you know, is that, for example, as of now, the governing party, the Socialist Party, you know, is still leading 13 points over the Conservatives. Bad news, but good news, bad news. But the sectors that have been suffering, you know, actually has been the municipalities, the cities, individual cities have been exhausting, you know, the funds, you know, for reconstruction. And then again, you know, one positive sign that in spite of all this, then what is actually amazing is to see that have been no social confrontations, you know, among the people, and it can be linked, can be compared, you know, to the latest similar incident with the economic crisis of 10 years ago. That actually was hard, but there were no social confrontations. In a place that at that time actually was said that unemployment was 25–30%, while in youth, you know, was 40–50%. Did anybody believe that? Well, the reality is that that actually was the result of one typical Spanish trick. In other words, not actually stating the truth. In other words, more people really work on the ground. And second, and this is, I think, the most important fact, and this is possibly going to be very, very, very important for the survival now, is that one social institution that conservatives, and in the old times, you know, Spaniards, they've been always, you know, very proud and say, hey, what is important here in this country and not like in other countries is that the family works, la familia española and all this. But the very interesting thing is actually the Spanish family work at that time, and possibly is going to work now. There are families, a lot of families, thousands of families today, you know, that all the members in a family of 3 generations are unemployed. In the old times, in the last economic crisis, actually, what actually happened is that grandparents earning only unemployment benefits actually paid, you know, for the survival of grandchildren and children. You know, this may happen again anyway.
Professor Roy?
Yes, I'll finish.
Please, we are exactly.
Okay, so then finish this, you know, is that actually we have the confirmation that of Spain, you know, faithful to the call of the European Union, and this is not going to change in the future. Now, finally, yes, you know, the news are going to show, you know, one bad news, which is that possibly one person that contributed a lot to the reconstruction of Spain as a democracy now, you know, is doing, you know, something wrong at the end of his career, and we'll have to examine, you know, the possible consequences of this.
Thank you very much, Professor Roy, for your presentation. A very personal note, but also quite acknowledgeable, coming from a very experienced person and a brilliant mind like yours. Thank you for this. I'm very happy that we received so far. I have here some 6 questions. Please feel free to send more to us. Here we have a 7th. I'm also very happy to see that, summing the almost 100 people here on Zoom plus 50 on Facebook, we are a very good group of 150 people, almost an Audimax, as they would call it in Germany, a huge aula. So I'm very happy to see this panel is interesting for the, I guess, mostly Mexican audience, but also hopefully Latin American and European, and also all around the world. So let me start with the questions. And this is, I guess, it was posed at the beginning of the conversation after Paolo Vacca was presenting. And it's very well addressed to him, but also to Piotr. And it's, where did I have it? Yes, sorry. What is the position of Greece and other European Union members regarding the dispute on limits with Turkey? So this is a question.
Piotr, I'll leave it to you, that you are closer to the fire at this moment.
Excellent. Please, Piotr.
All right, thank you. I will close the video so that there is no disruption. Very shortly, Turkey and Greece are at odds with one another for many, many years. And recent years have shown that if you're in the EU, you are ruling the policy of the entire Union towards the external partner. Ireland has dictated the policy of the EU towards UK. Cyprus is dictating the policy of the EU towards Turkey. So if there's any proxy problem out there between Greece and Turkey, between Cyprus and Turkey, there is always 100% situation that entire EU is behind Greece and Cyprus. Therefore, if anybody is thinking that Turkish accession to the EU is possible within the next 10, 20, 30 years, think this. There is an argument which goes, France and Germany are not interested in Turkish accession, but they don't want to say it out loud publicly. Therefore, they are happily hiding behind smaller nations such as Greece or Cyprus. So Greece and Cyprus already have the backing in their particular individual approaches and policies and problems solving and preferences of the big guys out there and the big shots. Again, status quo will prevail. It is in EU's interest to have Turkey close, but there is no interest to have Turkey in. Next year, Turkey will have bigger population than Germany. And I'll end on this note.
Thank you very much, Piotr. I would then move to a second question. And the questions are not addressed to specific participants. So if you also, Sonia, Professor Roy, naturally, Paolo, if you want to also comment on or give a reply to these questions, feel free to do it. The second question is about Euroscepticism. And Euroscepticism in the south of in the South European countries. And people, one person is asking about if this movement is growing in the South European countries, or if there's an increase in the right-wing extremism in these countries, and also more specifically, how are these forces or movements developing in Spain or Italy? One question actually refers to, are we gonna see a Ital-Dexit or Ital-Exit? So please, who wants to take this?
Maybe I can start with this one. You know, on one end, Euroscepticism is strong in Europe. It's still strong in Europe, not only in the south of Europe, but across the continent. And there are nationalist and Eurosceptic forces, not only in in Italy, but also in Germany, in France, and in Central and Eastern Europe, as Piotr was explaining. That said, certainly in Italy, but I think Joachim also confirmed from Spain, there is no serious politician at this moment who would bet his political career on the exit from the European Union. There were a lot of rumors just after Brexit. Particularly after the result of the referendum, gave the impression that there was popular support, potentially more countries for leaving the European Union. I think the facts of the last 2 years have shown that there isn't, and that in fact Euroscepticism is making steps back, because people are understanding that the European Union is useful, and that the European Union is there to stay. That life outside the European Union would be a lot tougher, and this is understood also in Italy and Greece. I think we are all afraid that the European Union will react badly to the COVID crisis, and that a lack of response or a slow response would give a new impetus to the Eurosceptics, particularly in the south of Europe. Fortunately, the European politicians, the politicians of the main member states, have opened their eyes on the gravity of the situation, understood that there was a potential breakup of the European Union at risk, and they've reacted, I think, promptly to the crisis. And I think the financial package that had just been launched is a game changer. Is a game changer for the effects that it will have, is a game changer for the way the European Union will be perceived by citizens across the south of Europe, and will be a game changer for the European Union itself. It's not the end of the game. The European Union has still a lot of problems that give force to Eurosceptics across Europe, in the north and in the south, and those issues will need to be addressed. Certainly the response to COVID is not sufficient to answer all challenges the European Union is facing, and Eurosceptics will still have their arguments to appeal to people, but I think that today they are certainly at the margins. In the key countries in Europe, Central and Eastern Europe is a bit of a special place at the moment, and Poland and Hungary are maybe the exception, where nationalism and Euroscepticism is on the rise and in government.
Okay, so let's.
Is my turn or?
Yes, Professor Roy, if you want.
Okay, I would sign, most of the statements made by Paolo about Spain, and I would probably even increase that, in the sense that both in the elite level and among the regular population, Spain is, Europe is still, very present, for a combination of reasons. The politicians, for example, they say, that actually they, with being in Europe makes them, more important, and so on. And second, the regular, the citizens actually can perceive, that without full membership in the European Union, that would threaten, one of the most important industries, tourism. And if you, for example, we would do a poll in the leading press, and the ones that really follow the whole thing about, for example, the Brexit, would come to the conclusion, that the general assessment is that the British, made a mistake. And now they are laughing, about the consequences anyway. So there is no change. I'm still going back into what Ortega said. The general assessment is that Spain has problems, will always have problems, but there is always a solution, and that solution includes, being part of Europe.
The European Union. Thank you, Professor Roy. Piotr, you wanted to add something.
Yes, only because I'm drafting a paper about Italian and Spanish responses and situation with COVID. Let me just tell you two things. First, it was real in Italy during the most difficult period in March and April. The skepticism was extremely high. 2/3 of Italians were in favor of leaving. It's much higher than anywhere else in the Union, including British. The Brexit never got more than 50% So the Italian actions such as Ci salviamo da soli, where people were burning European flags online, and those things were happening. And the reason is because it was emotional reaction to the situation on the ground on the day. And because of that particular situation, the response was also massive. And this is why, also Paolo mentioned this, the importance of this budget, the importance of, it's not even about the money, it's about solidarity. It's about sharing a common perspective and common future. And this is why there is a chance that we will overcome this kind of emotional anti-European response with a set of policies that will guide Italy out of the crisis that this country has been for 20 years. It's not just COVID, the situation. And Spain is a completely different story. Spain is, as Professor Roy already mentioned, this rule, I believe it continues, that Spain is a problem, Spain has problems, and European are responses. This response that comes with COVID will help Spain and Italy to come back. Those are the two countries, number 1 and 2, to benefit from this recovery fund.
Thank you, Piotr. Let me address these questions, the following questions to Sonia. One of the questions is, how is the European Union dealing with the influx of migrants from the Middle East, North Africa region in the context of COVID? That would be one. And second, what are the security threats in the EU regarding the 5G Chinese technology?
Thank you for the questions. I think Piotr volunteered also to answer the question of migration, since he's monitoring it in the field in Greece. So I'll leave it to him. As for the Chinese technology, I think the specific question was on Germany's response, and it's definitely different from what we've seen in UK, US, Japan. As far as I followed, Germany has discussed more recently its law on information security, and overall conclusion has been that security institutions are going to get very comprehensive competencies to supervise the qualifications, the quality of the manufacturers of 5G technology. So in conclusion, the German lawmakers did not say no to 5G technology. They didn't say no to Chinese companies. They haven't said no to Huawei in particular. They have just tasked their security institutions to supervise the way it's used and that it doesn't endanger the cyber security of Germany and its partners. And if I may add, in relation to my previous intro presentation, I think we've seen in Germany as a good example of being protector of privacy in Europe because of its political legacy. Its lawmakers have been way more sensitive when it comes to endangerment of privacy, and they have been among the initiators with few other EU member states that the European Commission comes up with the standards for development of contact tracing applications that wouldn't endanger privacy, which was the example of normative power Europe that I was talking about in my introduction. So EU showed in a timely manner, or the few member states and a commission, that they can come up with a model for a real life problem, prevention of spreading of virus, but respecting its democratic principles and protecting privacy. And I think this is what we need to see more, both from member states and EU institutions in the future.
Thank you, Sonia. So then, Piotr, could you like to take on the...
Sure.
You hear me? On the EU dealing with the influx of migrants from MENA region in the context of COVID.
Sure. I will merge this with the comment that just came to my words on solidarity. The word solidarity is really on the rise in the EU right now. It's a popular catchphrase, and it's a popular line to take right now to play in favor of European solidarity, increase European solidarity, etc. And I wonder whether this idea of more European solidarity, meaning funds, for example, will spread to the migration area. Now, COVID and migration, you may not notice in Mexico, is that the numbers have really went down. The influx of people went dramatically down, and there are some cynical NGOs here where I am right now on Greek islands who say, well, during lockdown, all the watchdogs were not allowed to watch. Therefore, there might be a situation or situations when the boats were coming, they were arrested on the ground of Greek islands or Italian islands or wherever, and put back on a ship to Turkey or Tunisia or Libya or where they were coming from, which would be effectively breaking the law because once a person reaches the territory of an EU state, can ask for asylum and has to be taken seriously for it. So this is hypothetical. We do not have proofs of that. This is speculation. But nevertheless, the numbers of newly incoming people into EU through all the 4 corridors have been significantly reduced because the borders were shut down, and many borders were shut down. Now on the issue of the competition to get the vaccine, there is a global competition for sure, but Europeans, at least for once, are not in competition with one another for the vaccine. And the Commission is doing its best to actually build a bigger coalition worldwide. So not only EU countries, but third countries as well, as regards the vaccine in the future, so that there is no competition. The only one standing out for sure is the Americans and President Trump, but not only one. I mean, we see that the Russians and the Chinese are also not really going to be like in solidarity with everybody else. So let's wait and see how the solidarity truly works out in when we have, if we have the vaccine for COVID.
Thank you, Piotr. There's a set of 2 questions regarding economic issues. In this case, I would like to ask Paolo to shed some light on this. The questions are: is there a middle or long-term economic plan for recovering from COVID effects. And I would add then the other, with the new EU budget, are we talking now about a new, or about a debt mutualization in the European Union?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start from the reaction to the economic recovery from COVID. It's difficult to say at the moment because there is a lot of uncertainty on whether the worst is behind our backs or there will be, a second wave of infections across Europe that will have an enormous economic impact again. So it's difficult to predict. What we know for the moment is that the economic recovery will come from a mix of national measures, and the bigger countries will have more resources to relaunch their own economies, the smaller will have less, plus this economic recovery fund from the European Union that will help particularly the countries of the south of Europe, but not only. In the case of Italy, 200 billion out of the 750 will go to the country, which are in a period of 3 years, which is certainly of great help. The second question on debt mutualization, and during the financial crisis, or in general during the debate on the future of the economic and monetary union that we have witnessed in the past 10 years, there were a lot of talks and proposals, very specific proposal on debt mutualization. The idea was that on the example of the early days of the United States, at a certain point, at least part of national debt could be assumed, mutualized into some forms of European debt and assumed by the European Union as a way to decrease the level of indebtedness, particularly of the countries of the south of Europe. The last 10 years have shown that this route to Europeanization of national debts of the past is just politically not viable, because the resistance of the political class and the public opinion in the countries of the north of Europe, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, the Nordics in general, is just too strong. The idea is, the debt of the past need to be paid by whoever contracted those debts. There is a new route which has been explored with the financial package for COVID, which is not to mutualize the debt of the past, but to incur together debt for the future, to issue debt at the European Union level directly to finance programs by the European Union, or to finance member states to the extent they implement priorities that the European Union has set, particularly in terms of reconversion of the economy and of the digital revolution. This is a new and different way to mutualize debt. It creates European resources that fund European programs that eventually will also decrease the level of spending at national level, and therefore the level of debt at national level. The big questions still open are, will these instruments that we are discussing now be one-offs that will expire in the next few years once they've exhausted their purpose, or will they be made permanent as a way to finance the European Union programs and policies? And question number two, will this debt, if ever comes to be repaid, will the repayment be financed by national contribution by member states? That is the way the European Union normally finances itself, or will the European Union have its own forms of taxation of a meaningful size that will repay European debt with European resources? And these two questions are, the big questions for the European Union for the next few years.
Professor Roy.
May I just
yes,
1
of course.
second to add something? Actually, no, wait a minute. Is what I have to do. No, you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Is that one factor by which we can test, we can analyze the level of Europeanization of any country, you know, is actually in two programs related to culture. One is the Bologna program, which is not a strictly European Union, it's the European-wide. And the second is the Erasmus program. In the first one, I think there have been some progress in many countries, okay? And actually have been helping some, like in the case, for example, of Spain, still lagging behind, because Spain, you know, in this area is, the performance is dismal. There is a high degree of inbreeding in the European universities. You know, you go to one university, to one department, and everybody in that department has graduated from the same department. That does not happen in some other countries in Europe. Until this is resolved, there is no Europeanization, really. But the second one, the Erasmus program, I think that should be given a priority all over Europe and in some countries. And in that, the statistics show, amazingly, that Spain is the leader, both in receiving students from other countries and in sending students, you know, to other European countries. I think that there is the future. There is the future of constructing a Europe that now is in the youth period.
Thank you, Professor Roy. There's a question regarding exactly what is the perspective of science, research, and education in the future. What will be the post-pandemic scenario in Europe? So you started already to describe a little bit what you think will be. If you or some other of the colleagues would like to develop on this, what are the future perspectives of science, research, and education in Europe?
I can try and say that we were all excited at the beginning with the comeback or return of experts to the mainstream public fora. So I guess that it's the similar situation in Mexico as it is in Serbia or other countries in the world, that we all know by name and surname the leading epidemiologists and virologists in our countries, and that they are kind of household names, and that we were promised that they are the ones designing the response of governments. However, I think the situation again varies depending on the quality of democracy in country and whether these doctors are really let to guide, or they're there to kind of justify the responses of government. And I might come back home to Serbia and give you an example of misuse of doctors and expertise for political reasons. So we had a very tough lockdown, first 2 months of health emergency. We were forbidden to leave home during evening. The people above 65 years old were not let to go out at all. And after 2 months of scare and consistent messaging by the health team, overnight the data that was provided changed, and the measures were relaxed, state of emergency put down, and all because of the need to organize an early elections. And in the course of 2 or 3 weeks before the elections, we have seen doctors giving statements that the COVID is no longer so dangerous. And we had the first football match organized in Europe, if we don't count Belarus that had its football league playing all the time. We had the big concerts organized, the tennis tournament, and election rallies. And all of this just to organize in elections in which there was no actually fair competition. And this has resulted in significant increase of a number of infected persons, and bringing our health system that was coping with the crisis in first 2 months almost to the breaking point. And Serbia is not the only country where doctors were not actually, and experts were not use their voice and evidence properly. I think the most disturbing example I have came upon was the Uzbekistan, where they were bringing doctors had to applaud on public TV every evening when a patient would be leaving a hospital, and this was to kind of play the performance that things are improving and situation is better. So there has been an optimism initially, but I'm not sure that the science is treated as neutral or more valid. It depends very much on its status in a country before the crisis. That would be my response.
Thank you. We are reaching almost the end of our session, but there are still 2 questions I would like to pose. One is related to energies. Here we have the question, what are the main drivers of European Union's approach to renewable energies? Is it an environmental concern or the lack of having fossil fuels in the territory? And what are the security implications of this? For instance, autonomy from Russia. So who would like to take this question? Energy.
If I can start, because I probably was the person who initiated this question when talking about transition. Europe has a real ambition of becoming a carbon neutral continent by 2050, and it is a combination of factors. The climate factor is one of them. Competitiveness is another, because the transformation drives new research and drives new industries to grow. So, you have the big new European companies that are big on, for example, the windmills that are being constructed actually in Europe. Now, the independence of resources is strategic independence, is not as relevant from my perspective. So it's not about that Europe as a whole wants to cut itself away from supplies of resources from Russia or Algeria. It's more about diversification and emissions. If, for example, one of the discussions we have on energy right now is whether European funds should go into investments related to gas. So is gas climate neutral? Is gas a good resource to invest into or not? The answer is not crystal clear, but for a country like the one I'm coming from, it's vital, because it is about decarbonization from coal consumption into something which is also stable and reliable and durable, before we decarbonize fully into some new technologies that are will be coming in the future. They are not there yet today. So it's an interplay between what we want and what is possible out there. Sergio was mentioning this important element of the EU of being a normative actor? Well, we've had normative solutions sometimes, for example, on cars and CO2 emissions on cars and trucks that are impossible to be held right now in 2020. And the truck drivers are protesting against the high expectations of their trucks because they are unable to meet those expectations, because the European legislators have thought that the technological development would progress so fast that by this time it would be actually working. So we have some problems in this kind. Europe tries to mobilize innovation with normative instruments as well, and sometimes it works, sometimes it works a bit less. But overall, that's precisely the European way of stimulating also research, also technological progress, so it can be sold outside to the world outside of here. So strategic dependence on certain markets, not as because of an issue. The innovation, big issue, and decarbonization, big issue as well.
Thank you, Piotr. So let me then move to the last question, and this is the last question that I think actually it's the most inviting one regarding let's try to imagine how it's going to be the future. And this is a question that I would like to pose to all of you to give me your take home message of 1 minute long. So this question is, what will be the remainings of former normalcy in the new normal? How are we gonna live in the future when it comes to economic activities like tourism or other things? And how are we gonna live, or how do you imagine it's gonna be other services in our life, sports, culture? What is your prospective image on the future? And in this case, please be brief, just to say farewell to our audience. And I would like then to do it, to make this last round in the opposite way we did it at the beginning. So in this case, I would ask Professor Joaquin Roy to give us 1 minute of prospective thought.
1 minute. No, wait a minute. Is it fine now? Yeah. Okay. 30 seconds. I'm skeptical about what we see in analysis in webs and so on, predicting that nothing is going to be the same. I'm really skeptical about that. Okay. In other words, that everything is going to be changed, and all the past experience is going to be nothing. I really believe that sensible people are going to opt for improving what actually it was built before. But tabula rasa completely, you know, I really don't think that there is a future for it. However, then learning from mistakes of the past, especially in building or rebuilding or improving or the constant construction of the European Union, I really believe so. I'm a constant believer of two, I would say, fitting portraits of the European Union. One by a Mexican writer, and second, you know, by a European politician. Mexican writer is my favorite from Mexico, is Carlos Fuentes. He described the European Union as a medieval cathedral always in construction. The European Union is not finished, and it will never be finished. Enrique Barón, former president of the European Parliament, actually rephrased that and said that the European Union is like that church in Barcelona, the Sagrada Familia. I was born just 100 yards from, and I really believe that. And I just would like to express this. People are, for example, predicting now, yes, that Sagrada Familia is going to be built completely in about 4 years, you know, and so on. Well, let me tell you this. I belong to a generation that we would be very sad if the Sagrada Familia is finished. The Sagrada Familia always building. And the European Union, I really believe, is the same. So if someone say, okay, let's finish this, let's concretize this constitutionalization, making the European Union as a stone, I think it will be a mistake. The European Union will be always in construction.
Thank you very much, Professor Roy. Now give the word to Pyotr Kaczynski.
Thank you very much. I fully sign up to what we heard from Professor Roy. I think that the future will be a mix between what we experienced over the last couple of months and our traditional way of doing things. We did not discuss as much about the other big thing out there, which is the technological revolution. And the COVID showed, and COVID times, outside of the health disaster that happened, how the new tools that we are using today for our event became a new standard. But this new standard is not going to completely make irrelevant the previous standards. It will become a fusion with the new tools and the old reality when we are able to come back to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Piotr. Then I give the floor to Sonja Stojanovic Gajic.
Thank you. I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm afraid I'm going to share two pessimistic scenarios, although I support everything Piotr and Professor Roy have mentioned. One scenario is that because the problems of democracy in Europe are perceived as the problems of the new member states or its neighborhood, so kind of post-communist countries, and not as the problems of the old EU member states. I think the response is to the crisis of democracy and undermining of democracies are too slow, too weak, and might lead to the fact that the voices that are criticizing democracy as the least worst system actually get prominence. So what I'm afraid of and what I'm reading about is many of the countries facing discussions similar to the ones we had in the 30s of the last century in Europe. And this is what worries me, that, you know, in my part of the world, we still remember wars. It's in my lifetime and I'm not that old. And in much of the Western Europe, it's not imaginable that things can deteriorate at a very rapid pace internally and in between states. So this is what I'm worried about. This is one thing. The other thing, which is already there and which I think is going to stay after COVID, is deepened inequality. So these adaptations to the technology, to all the kinds of different new normals, which might be a positive developments, are not going to be shared and distributed equally within societies, but will actually increase inequalities between those that can afford or to work from home, for example, and those that have to go and risk their lives and their family lives.
Thank you very much, Sonja. Finally, Paolo Vacca, please.
Briefly, I mean, the future of the European Union is very uncertain. And as much as things have taken a turn for the good in the past few weeks or 2 months, they can take a turn for the bad, confronted with other challenges. I want to bet on a European Union that becomes stronger, that you know, in the next decade will be more integrated, with most, if not all, countries joining the single currency, the euro, with more instruments at European level to do policies at European level, but also European Union more differentiated, a European Union that manages to avoid risks like Brexit, being more flexible on and finding arrangements with the more reluctant member states to take their time and maybe stay in an outer circle if they don't want to join all institutions or all policies. I also bet on a European Union that with time will take responsibilities at the borders of Europe, particularly in the Mediterranean and in the Middle East. I think economic integration will be much stronger than integration in defense and security, which will take more time, but that eventually will need to follow. And I also want to bet on a European Union that can transform its economy and its society in a direction which is technologically more advanced and more sustainable.
Thank you, Paolo. Thank you all for your comments, your presentations. It has been a very enlightening conversation. I think it was a very good idea by Nicola of suggesting a panel that bridges policy/politics and academia, and I'm very thankful for this invitation. So please, Nicola, now is your turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zirawen. And to wrap up a bit and to close the session, I appreciate to all of the participants, members of AME and the viewers for joining us today. Thank you for staying us for 1 hour and over the 40 minutes. I suggest you follow us on the social media, equally as our participants today read Professor Roy. Paolo, thank you very much for sharing a bit of your optimism. Sometimes I feel sorry, and like being on the other side of the ocean and not being there with you in all the fights that you're leading for the federalization of the European Union, or spreading the idea of what it means to be the European, what it means to think about the future of European integration. It's good to hear you. I haven't heard you for in a bit, and to shake off this kind of skepticism and skeptical news and opinions that we are often subjected to. Equally, thank you for Professor Roy for giving us and for educating generations of students and bridging that transatlantic bridge, or more increasingly gap, that we are seeing it's being created, for spreading and sharing your ideas also down south towards Mexico. I wish you a very good semester, upcoming semester, and once that unfortunately you decide to retire, I wish you a very good and fortunate career at the bench of Barcelona. It needs a bit of reboosting, the Barcelona team. Piotr, we look forward to your reports from the Greek islands, and particularly from Lampedusa, the central island, for a long period of time of dealing with refugees. I promise we will find also a Mexican outlet. It shouldn't be that hard, so we can also get the news and your reports to be spread around here. Sonja, equally as I apologize to Paolo, I'm sorry for not being there for you with you in Serbia to fight for building up our democracy, for strengthening democracy, not only in Serbia, but in the region. Thank you very much for doing that and for finding time to bring us closer to what's happening in the region that is often neglected from this part of the world. Actually, you have mentioned what Serbia is living when it comes to experts and politicization of doctors. Equally, we are living the same situation here in Mexico. There are so many parallels that bring these two countries so separated geographically, but so close in terms of politics, corruption, and everything bad that we are living these days. Zirawen, thank you for serving your country, our country. Thank you for serving today also AME, and for being here with us. And finally, a big thanks to Ileani and Daniela from the offices of AME for making, logistically speaking, everything possible today that functions perfectly well with Facebook. Sometimes we overlook the contribution of the people who are standing behind the organization. And to all of you together, to you and your families, please stay well, stay healthy. Think about the processes, remain very critical about processes and the time that we are living today. But please, in being critical, do rely on only fact-checked information and evidence. Restrain from conspiracy theories, restrain yourself from reaching out to misinformation, fake news, and be responsible towards the community where you live and towards your country and the wider humanity by picking up on fact-checked data and information. This is a fight that we will have to lead in the time that comes. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Stay well, stay healthy.
Bye, thank you.
My pleasure.